This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 271, the September 26th, 2017 edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, with you once again, back with you, coming to you from the Brooklyn Bunker, alongside Muggs, the handicapping Labrador. It is Muggs' 11th birthday today. We started the day off with a nice 4.5-mile walk in Prospect Park. She's happy, looking forward to eating a pupcake later in celebration of her birthday. My daughter Perrin suggested we make her a liver cake, and I'm horrified to say that my wife is taking the suggestion seriously. I was just thinking carrot cake, no sugar, something like that. Anyway, we're going to get it figured out. Good tidings to Muggs, the handicapping Labrador. Also joining me today, a globe-trotting man. The plane, it was grounded for a while. It's been up and running around. I think we're catching him today on the way from the plane to the limousine. He is, of course, the people's champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
Muggs went on a 4-mile walk. I know I went to Brooklyn one time and was very unprepared for a 4-mile walk with Muggs and with PTF, the King of the North. So good for Muggs. Happy birthday.
Big John gave you a C- for that one, I think, and said, possibly needs a layoff, if I remember how they clocked you that day in Prospect Park. I myself am back in training. No joke, JK. I mean, I wish this was an exaggeration. I gained 20 pounds in Saratoga this year. I guess that's what unlimited Shake Shack, hanging out in the paddock bar every day and doing literally no exercise to the point of taking Ubers to and from the track, even though you live a mile away, will do to you. But I'm back in training, not near the form I was in cycling up to the Brooklyn Half Marathon last year, but I'm going to circle a race on the calendar, maybe a turkey trot or something on Thanksgiving Day, and get back on the beam, man, because it's been too long.
We might need to switch your trainer. Maybe get you a guy who's got a little bit of a better vet, maybe.
Or at least maybe the race scheduling is the problem. I'm sort of been going in this Simon Callahan type mode of one race every 6 months. I think I might need to get in a little more of a Baffert rhythm every 3 to 4 weeks. Maybe that would help. But at any rate, I'm working on it. You referenced Game of Thrones. Of course, you've been catching up on the show. I actually want to talk about that later. But there's too much big news, and let's start off with the biggest news of today. I woke up to a text from our buddy Doogie, speaking of the paddock bar, one of the boys from LA, Lower Albany, who hit me up this morning and said, finally, some great news for horse players. And I didn't, to that point, know what he meant and had to do a quick little Google search. Tell him what I found, JK.
Yeah, our good friends at the NTRA have been working really hard for a really long time on getting some things accomplished for us, the horse players, and it's officially been done. A lot of people signed a lot of petitions, and a lot of people paid a lot of attention to this whole situation, and it's finally come where there's some IRS regulations that have been adjusted, and they're in our favor. Some things that are going to save some paper. They're going to stop all these hurricanes from happening by slowing down global warming with saving some paper, and it's all good news.
You're out of your mind, but I do like that. I do like that leap of logic. JK, of course, talking about the change in withholding regulations. From now on, instead of being the sort of absurd, you pay at 600 to 1, whether your base bet was $2 or $500. In other words, you could put 500 in the pick six, hit for 602, and have to fill out tax paperwork on that. Now it'll be 300 to 1 on the base amount. Just a huge difference, and is going to be life-changing for horse players, particularly professional horse players who've ended up just having to deal with an absolute nightmare of tax withholding situation that basically has been amounting to giving the government an interest-free loan, tying up liquidity, how you can operate a business when your liquidity is tied up in giving the government an interest-free loan. Good luck with that. Horse players have been doing it but now it looks like these draconian laws are going to be changed in favor of the horse player. It's great stuff. Did you I hear you unmuted, JK, as on your way to the limo. Did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, no, my question is, I guess, is like, just for clarification, you said the base minimum. So I've thought that it was, if you make a combination 5x5x5x5, then, and you've invested, what's the math on that? 25, 125, 5, 6 something, 6 and change, or whatever it is. That's considered your base investment, right? So as long as you don't go 600 to 1 over that, or 300 to 1, over that 625, you're in the clear, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Correct.
Okay,
Maybe
cool.
I used base bet wrong. It used to be based on the total. It used to be based on the base bet. So in other words, you put 500 in, you hit for 600. That 600 was the magic number because you were 300 to 1 on the base bet of $2, right? And now it's going to be based on that 500 total investment. So you take your 300 to 1 from there. Funny enough, I just went on the NTRA website to look at this, and there is President and CEO Alex Waldrop giving a live press conference as we speak. I'll go back and check out the replay of that later. Certainly, Alex and Keith have done a ton of work on this topic. Also want to give credit to the horse players who really helped start this process more than, I guess it's about 20 years ago at this point, in the wake of, I guess a little less, more than 15, in the wake of the Breeders' Cup Pick 6 scandal. A group of players got together under the auspices of the NTRA and had the players panel, and they put together various recommendations for the sport. And one of them was about withholding, with changing these withholding laws among the players who shared their tax returns to help get this ball rolling and get support for the idea, to show just how difficult of a situation it put pro players in, and by extension didn't allow them to bet as much money as they wanted to, therefore costing everyone in the game, including the government, money in the long run. Mike Maloney is the guy I'm talking about, and Mike was definitely at the forefront of this, and I think you should expect to see his name in some of the coverage as well, and it wouldn't surprise me if right now Alex up there on the podium with the NTRA wallpaper in the background is giving props to guys like Mike who helped get the ball rolling all those years ago. Very, very happy day for the players.
Absolutely. And, it's funny, like I think back in my life of like all the times I've had scores, and like so many of them that, there's withholding, and like I'm thinking how many of them there would not have been withholding on, and like how that would have significantly changed. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I've gotten to a point where, because I'm a semi-professional player, I mean, I'm not, it's not what puts food on the table. And I think other guys that are weekend warriors will agree with me, is like, it kind of works out a little bit sometimes when they hold a little bit of your money for you, because then you can, it's just like, it's kind of like a nice Christmas present come April. But the truth of the matter is that it's much better with it in our pocket. And if you're a professional player, I've heard many professional players tell me towards the end of the year, they start to run a little bit low on bankroll because so much of their money is tied up in withholding. And then on top of that, because their profession is professional gambling, when you go back to try to get that money, it's not like the guy down the street who owns his construction company is a 1099 guy, and he wants to get his money back. From what I understand, it's much more of a challenge as a professional horse player to get that money back from the government.
Oh, absolutely.
Than it would be if you were like a painter or something of that nature. It's
very complicated. It can be done, but taxes for horse players are notoriously complicated and made much more complicated by the fact that every state, for the state taxes, has different rules. I mean, if you're going to be betting any serious amount playing the horses, I definitely recommend trying to find an accountant in your state who has expertise in this. And it's not the kind of thing where you can do it after the fact. If you go and have a six-figure contest score and then start thinking about how you're going to make that work on your taxes, like that's going to be that much harder to impossible, where you're going to end up losing a lot of that money. Better to address these situations in advance, have a plan. We talk about keeping records all the time as a tool to make you a better horse player. Well, the other thing keeping records is going to do is really help you stay out of hot water with this stuff and make sure you get the maximum amount of money back. And there might not be any better time with this change in rules for people to get a little bit more seriously about how they're tracking their money and how they're dealing with the tax implications of being a horse player, because it's not an easy deal, and you'll hear a lot of different advice on the subject. I've written about it several times. My best advice always: find an accountant, but not some accountant from the outside world. Try to talk to your fellow horse players. If you can find a pro player in your state, all the better. Find out how they use. Get somebody who really understands the ins and outs and what you can and cannot do in these regards.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've seen some tweets, since the news came out, of things that are just a little bit unfortunate and inaccurate. One unfortunate thing is that, unfortunately, I think that this helps a lot of people, but there's certain states where it doesn't help. I think Chicago, or Illinois in general, I think it's tough in Illinois. Like, I think
very tough state.
You can't report losses. I don't know what the actual situation is, but I think it's really rough in Illinois.
Right. By the letter of the law, that's correct in Illinois. There's I forget the specifics, but I did talk to a Chicago horse player at some point who explained it to me that it's particularly difficult in Illinois. Plus, they charge you extra fees too.
There's extra points you got to pay on everything you bet, and then also, the idea, and just for those who, I saw a couple of people, and one of them I like on a personal level, talk about how the NTRA said that it's going to increase handle by $1 billion, and look, regardless if it's $1 billion or if it's 500 million or if it's 300 million, like, be happy that something good happened for us as horse players, because the same people complaining are the same people that were crying about Keeneland raising the takeout, right? It's like, you can't just be pissed off all the time, because people stop listening to you. You have to appreciate when cool stuff happens to you, so that people will take you serious when you're upset about something. But when you're just the guy who's mad all the time, you just become the guy who's mad all the time.
I think that's well put. I think that's absolutely fair. Interesting to see of creating many Twitter controversies this morning. Also, JK, being so hard on others' Twitter usage. I didn't really expect you to be the Emily Post of Twitter today.
Hey, hypocrisy is one thing that will wake me up, and it drives me insane.
We're not gonna.
I know we're not. I'm just saying, but hypocrisy. If you want to get me fired up, say something super hypocritical. Just that'll get me rolling.
Oh my gosh! All right, let's dive in to when I woke up this morning, what I thought was going to be the lead of the show, and that is West Coast's impressive win in the Pennsylvania Derby. We'll start off just by looking at that race itself. JK, what'd you think of the effort?
I don't know. He's one of those horses where, I've cleverly tried to be against a few times. I've tried to formulate an opinion about how good he really is. I was fortunate enough to include out of fear on Travers Day, where we had a good day. It's never been a love thing for me, and I was against him on Saturday, and he ran well. I think I'm probably going to be against him again. Moving forward, I'm still not that I'm not convinced. I just don't think he's elite by any means, and I think he's had some, at least, favor most of the time in his favor. And I saw someone say the other day, that they couldn't see Mike Smith taking off of that horse in the Classic, and I would be absolutely shocked if he didn't ride Arrogant in the Classic and he chose the road to ride West Coast.
That was down the list on questions I was going to ask you, was about that. He wins the Pennsylvania Derby by 7. He scores with the 107 Beyer speed figure. I mean, he sure looks like the most talented 3-year-old on dirt we've seen. The other interesting question, and I just know this from experience, I've had the privilege since I started working for Daily Racing Form of being a voter for the Eclipse Awards. And I don't doubt that West Coast is a more talented horse than Always Dreaming. However, this is just my opinion, and it's the minority. I feel like if nothing else were to happen from here, if God forbid West Coast weren't to continue the fall campaign and show up in the Breeders' Cup Classic, as JK just alluded to, let's say that's it. I think in 3 months, voters are going to sit there and they're going to look at those PPs and they're going to start looking at grade 1s. And there's no doubt about it. And I think if you look in the history of the voting for the 3-year-old Eclipse Award, that Kentucky Derby, that's not worth one grade one, you know? That's worth like two, maybe 2.5 grade ones when it comes to...
It's terribly simple to me, Pete, right? If you had $1 million yearling and I asked you the question, Pete, would you rather win the Florida Derby or the Pennsylvania Derby? Which one would you pick?
I think most people, if that's the only information in the question and you know that the horse had a season other than those two races, I think you pick the Florida Derby with the thought that then you're going to the Kentucky Derby as one of the favorites, and that's probably why you're buying the $1 million yearling in the first place.
Do you want to win the Travers or the Kentucky Derby?
Well, I am the biggest Travers fan in the world, and I'm almost tempted to be a contrarian and tell you that Saratoga is so great, and I'm just envisioning us hanging out up in the secret spot and watching our horse win the Travers and thinking that, you know, that experience would be as good as any. And no, it's obviously the Kentucky Derby.
So, I mean, for me, it's like, who, and you put him in a match race, West Coast would eat his lunch, right? But I just...
That's interesting. So you agree. I was expecting you to disagree because most people seem to be
West
going
Coast
the other
better.
way on this one.
No, he's better.
Yeah.
But the
I'm not
accomplishment
denying
on paper,
that. I'm saying who in 3 months in the cold light of day right now do you vote for? And I think I'm still clicking the box. Now, it changed last year, the day after the Breeders' Cup Classic. I said, I'm voting for Arrogate. Arrogate is the better horse. And then I sat there, you know, I try to be very diligent. I think that's a great honor that I have to get to vote for those awards. And I sit down and I take that seriously. That's not just a blink test. I'm going through, I'm looking at PPs. And when I did that with Chrome and Arrogate last year, I blinked. I voted. I went against what I said originally and voted for Chrome. I think a lot of the people who are voters who are saying this they just might have a similar experience with this 3-year-old male award.
If West Coast hits the board in the Classic, I would then change my tune. That would be enough to tilt it for me. But as it is right now, I would vote for Always Dream.
It's annoying, JK, when we don't talk before the show and then we say a lot of the same things because you took the words right out of my mouth. That was a note I had. I feel like he hits the board in the Classic, and it's just like that's just a bridge too far. That's the little bit more he'd need to do to make me say no. It's a year-long award. It's not best horse through May, and I think that would get me personally as a voter over the hump. Of course, like I said, I've changed my mind before. We'll see how we feel going forward. But I was expecting an argument there, and we see it exactly the same way. Very different though than what a lot of smart folks are saying, and certainly it seems like the tide of Twitter agreeing with what some other smart folks are saying. But both of us in the same boat about that one.
Now, I think with West Coast kind of emerging, I think we could probably put to bed the Oscar Performance involvement, right? Because they're going to split enough votes that Oscar Performance now has no shot of winning 3-year-old.
That seems fair. I mean, that was always Oscar Performance was always like a default, and I was into that idea if he were to continue to go on and train. But I think even at the peak of my own thinking, it could be Oscar Performance. I think if an actual vote had taken place, I still think that Derby with one other grade one would have probably gotten it done. I think a lot of things would have had to go right for Oscar Performance. I mean, gosh, if he continues, you know, if he were to win out, including the Breeders' Cup, I mean, he could come back into the conversation in a big way. But I think so. So I wouldn't say there's a 0% chance, but I would say as it stands now, West Coast Emergence has definitely put a dent in that campaign. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think he'd have to win. He'd have to win the turf. In order to be considered, and who knows? It's a speed favoring track, a rock hard turf surface out at Del Mar, and if Oscar Performance shows up and wires him in the Breeders' Cup turf, and West Coast is off the board, that would probably be the hardest category for me to vote upon. That would
get excruciatingly difficult, honestly. I mean, I think if Oscar Performance were to win the turf, as for an American 3-year-old to win the turf, I mean, it feels like I'd have to vote for him, but it also just doesn't feel like that's all that realistic. Though you do make a good case about maybe the course suiting. Obviously, we'll know so much more when we get to see the horses who are coming over. In fact, let's make a note. If we have time at the end of the show today, let's do a little buy, sell, hold. Let's look at some Breeders' Cup Turf numbers, and let's look at some Breeders' Cup Classic numbers. Before we leave the topic, if Mike Smith were to choose, I kind of feel like if Mike Smith were to choose West Coast over Arrogate, that would tell you that there's something wrong with Arrogate, right?
Not on a ticket. If he gets off, not on a ticket.
Right. So
he knows the horse. He knows the horse through glory and through defeat. And if he finds it to be the right decision to take off of a Juddmonte horse for Bob Baffert to ride for the Barbers, and don't get me wrong, they're no run of the mill owner, but they're not Juddmonte. That would be the indication that all is not well.
You got your pink silks mixed up there, I think.
It's not Barber?
Gary and Mary West, isn't it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Gary and Mary West.
But I think it's my fault. I think it's the pink. I think it's the pink.
Same idea. Yeah, it's the pink silks. Same. The statement stands. I mean, they both are always involved in greatest stakes races. They're always involved in the biggest races in America. But they're not the operation that is Juddmonte.
Well, it's also just the personal connection to the horse that he's won, whatever the heck it is, some obscene amount of money on, and like you said, been through thick and thin. It would shock me to see him get off, and I agree. If it did, I would have to re-envision that race. Let's talk a little bit of, while we're on Mike Smith, let's talk a little bit about the Cotillion. It 'tis well, getting the job done, and a controversial ride on Abel Tasman. I know you had something to say about it on Twitter, JK, so I'll let you take the floor for this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bad. Okay, I initially said, and it came out the wrong way in our group text with Nick Tamero and all the guys that I thought it was a brilliant ride, and just he got beat. In hindsight, it probably wasn't a good ride, but my point was tell me what the difference is between that ride and the brilliant ride that he had in the CC, the Coaching Club American Oaks, right? Like, yes.
Does it come down to pace?
It does, but like, you get on a $1,200 animal that's going 40 miles per hour, and like, I appreciate the aggression. Like I've said before on this show, and I've said before in any other opportunity that we've had to talk about racing, you cannot be a guy who is like me, who gets so angry at passiveness from riders.
Agree with that.
You cannot get upset about that, but then get upset about aggression. Like it's so like I said, this, like what woke up my Twitter fingers this morning was the hypocrisy of that. It's like, it's ridiculous. You can't stand for one thing and get mad about someone doing that one thing. It's so ridiculous that that's why my point simply was like, well, what's the difference? Yeah, the pace was different, but he was being aggressive in both spots. And so that was the overriding theme there. And I can't be mad about aggression when I truly despise someone being passive.
All right. Now, I wish, and I wish I'd had a little more time this morning. We've talked before about how, the podcast was my main gig. I would have done all the tape and chart work to be able to have this discussion in a more intelligent way. I wasn't watching Parks close enough to really say what was going on between the inside and outside on Cotillion Day. I will admit that. But I will also say that I know historically it's a place where often the inside is not the place you want to be. And I thought that part of the criticism that sounded fair about the Smith ride this time around was taking the horse down onto the inside. And actually Mike Watchmaker pointed this out before I made the point. It did seem notable that he, in the next race, wanted no part of the inside. Did you watch enough Parks to have an opinion on inside outside?
Well, first of all, I mean, these guys are learning like we're learning. If you have someone who's declaring that it's inside or outside in the middle of the race day, they're taking a chance. And so, maybe Mike wasn't sure, and Mike made an aggressive move. And here's the other thing is I recall on Belmont Day, the inside not being where you wanted to be, and he dove down to the inside and won with Abel Tasman in a grade 1. So, is it if I was singled for my lungs to Abel Tasman, would I have appreciated that inside, that middle, that aggressive middle move, diving to a potentially dead rail. No, I don't really want that. So maybe I would be more willing to accept that as fault than the middle move in general. It was aggressive and it was wrong. I don't know what the outcome would have been otherwise if he would have waited and gone outside. Would he have won? Nick said it best, Tamaro. We'll never know, but it sure feels like he would have had a better shot. So, I'm not perfect every day when I wake up either, so you can't expect these guys to be. And I think most people would say that it was potentially a mistake. But my problem with it is like you can't be mad at him. It's the same thing he pretty much did the race before when she won a Grade 1.
Right. I mean, the little bit of a difference there, I guess, was this seemed a little quick early. That race, it seemed like after a quick, in the CCA Oaks, it seemed like after a quick first quarter. I'm doing this from memory. I don't have the chart in front of me, but I think they noticeably slowed down. And it did sort of, I don't know about force his hand, but it did seem to make a little bit more tactical sense where even if he'd gotten beat there, which he almost did, of course, that he could have pointed to that. But he would have been pilloried. The same brilliant ride would have gotten him all manner of criticism had Elate decided to go through that hole in that space. A couple other things to consider here. Baffert, I thought pre-race was like unusually, he's usually pretty bullish, straight shooter when it comes to evaluating the chances of his horses. He was making excuses before the race for Abel Tasman. Oh, I don't know about the distance and post and like as much as I wanted to beat Abel Tasman when we were talking about the race on the show on Friday, and then the more I looked, I did mention it as well as a possible upsetter, but I did also say, like, the more you looked, it was hard to leave Abel Tasman out completely. After hearing Baffert with the cold water routine, it did make me think that she was just going to probably this wasn't going to be the Grade 1 A+ game. And the other point I'll make about her, and part of the reason why maybe Smith had to do what he did, and this is maybe a bit more worrisome, the slow breaking. Like, I mean, I know she's never been like a great breaker, but sometimes, a horse who's had hard races late in the 3-year-old campaign, the slow breaking, can that be a sign of declining form? I guess, rather than reacting to those comments individually, JK, let me just ask you this. What do you think of Abel Tasman going forward? Are you generally inclined to be positive, or do you think there's some worrying signs of possible declining form?
I'm fine. I think she'll be one that'll be hard for me not to have on tickets moving forward. She's talented. I think the mile and an eighth is going to be better for her than the mile and a 16th. She'll be fully ready to rock and roll and cranked going into that spot. As we talked about, and maybe I talked about it a little bit more on out of the gate, but I thought I talked about it on the show as well. Is like the fact that she missed the Alabama, and then kind of just came over here in a mile and a 16th race. I thought she ran well. I mean, I don't think anyone would say she ran poorly. She ran really well. I think if you want to find a reason why she got beat, it was either A, the distance, or 2, the ride. So, I'd be interested in her moving forward for sure.
Okay, so you're not inclined to be cynical. For me, the jury's out. I want to see some good workouts. I want to hear positive vibes. If it's more of this, well, I don't know stuff going forward, and I might take that good horses. I mean, it's different if a horse breaks tardy every time. I mean, is she? It's funny. I just don't really remember. I know she's not, like I said, a great horse breaking, but to your eye, did she break worse than usual in this race?
Sorry, I was muted. There's like construction going on. I don't think it was worse than usual.
Okay.
And I actually just like recently heard that whole thing again, and I do agree with it. Like with fillies, like watching how they're breaking, and even just colts or even male horses in general. Horses in general, is like when they start to break a little bit slower, it's a real indicator of them not really wanting to. I think that's. Yeah. I think that's
combination of mental and physical wearing down, or just not being able to push off the same, suggests that they're just not as strong behind, I think is part of the theory that I've heard from horsemen talking about that issue. Anyway, jury's out there. Will be interesting to to follow along. Any other thoughts from you from Pennsylvania Derby Day? How'd you end up doing betting-wise?
I was alive to IRAP, so we all know how that ended. Hopefully he has a speedy recovery. But, that's where I was. I had an opinion there, and it was a bad one. But that's where I was. I was alive for him, for all to be right in the world.
It wasn't that bad an opinion. I mean, the horse did run second at a good number. You could have bailed out a lot in a one-way exacta. And obviously with getting hurt, I don't know exactly where the injury happened, but the fact that he got injured suggests that, maybe there was more in the tank. Unfortunately, I think that's it for his racing days, right?
Yeah, I don't think that, from what I understand, I'm no vet, but from what I understand, we should be concerned about life rather than racing, right?
But I think he's okay. I think he's stable. Anyway, we should all take.
I just think I think when you have a surgery of that magnitude, that that the fear of the L word becomes an issue, and so I think that's their concern now.
Yeah, well, it's a very talented horse who sort of came out of nowhere and really grew on me as a racehorse through his 3-year-old year and showed that he did have a lot of talent, and hopefully he'll have a speedy recovery, like you said, and have a nice life on the farm. That's the plan anyway. We'll see how that goes. If you have nothing else from there, your boy Sharp Azteca looked okay.
He's a nice horse. He is a nice horse. Very interesting to see what's going to come of that whole situation. I heard they had extended security around the barn, and the horse ran really well. He keeps running the same number over and over again. I think he's going to be extremely dangerous in that spot. I think he'll be tough. I predict that he's probably going to be the most likely winner to me, Breeders' Cup weekend.
Talking about the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, I assume, and he'd have to be the favorite anti-post. I'll click over there and take a look and see if we can get any prices for the Dirt Mile as well. And we'll come back to that when we get to the buy, sell, hold portion of the show. We had a bunch of questions, very interesting Twitter conversation, and something that I really enjoyed because it showed that horse racing Twitter doesn't have to be like all elements of Twitter where people are on one side of an issue or another side of the issue and they just sort of scream at each other and dig in their heels. There was actually some really good exchange of ideas with some really smart people on both sides of the equation. It all started with two friends of the podcast on opposite sides of this one. Duke Matisse lamenting low minimums in bets like the pick 4 and I guess by extension, the pick 5, his theory being that the payoffs, the equity has drained from these pools as time has gone on. I think largely the theory being that the biggest bettors have been able to, we talk about efficient betting all the time on here, and like our version of it. Well, the biggest bettors in the world, many of whom are using computer technology on not only the handicapping side of the equation, but also the betting side of the equation. I know I'm a believer that low minimums do sort of a law of unintended consequences thing, that they give these operations the opportunity to bet so efficiently that they drive basically the payouts down relative to the value. And what I mean by that basically is think about a pick bet as a parlay. Okay, a parlay, that's an old school bet for those who don't know, where you bet one horse and then that money rolls over to a horse in another race, and all the money that you won on leg A gets bet in leg B, and you had a chance to make a real score. However, if either leg of the parlay misses, the whole bet loses. That was sort of like the primitive parlays were the primitive version of the picks. And so one way to evaluate the theoretical value or equity in a pick is to look at what the pick pays relative to the parlay. Now, I'm not a math guy, so I have enough math to have created a spreadsheet to do this for me, because for some reason the numbers just don't fly right in my head the way they would with somebody like Duke. But I do agree that with the lower minimums, very often that parlay price or let me put it the other way. The pick price should be greater than the parlay. It like really, really should be, because you're paying one takeout instead of a takeout in each leg. And since the lower minimums have come in, it's gotten closer and closer, sometimes to where the pick price even pays lower than the parlay, which is just a gross and annoying situation for a horse player. So that's one side of the argument. Now, for years, I used to have this argument with the Man in Black, JK, years ago. The Man in Black was the first guy I ever heard, with Tom Quigley shortly behind him, making a similar point to Duke, that these low minimums were not good for the game. I was always on the exact opposite side of the issue before I sort of learned more about the computer guys and the way they bet and put more money and time and effort into these pick pools. I used to think, and this is still true, that the low minimum is a great thing for the horse player, because that allows me, at my limited bankroll, to make a ticket that's just as efficient as somebody like Duke. He'll be betting more money, but now I can have it where some of my combinations I have for just 50 cents, some I have for $1, some $2, some as many as $5. I can do that within a constricted bankroll, whereas with a high minimum, it's like you can't bet that efficiently, because it would just put me out of my bankroll comfort zone. And it was Nick Tamaro who made the point on Twitter. He seemed skeptical about my theory about the betting efficiency, and seemed to think that the low minimums were still a net good thing for allowing the little guy to be able to use some of the same tools as the big guy. We've never really even talked about this. So first, I'll just ask it to you as a question. Where do you stand on the issue, JK, of these low minimums?
Yeah, no, I'm a believer. I understand. I mean, my dad is the guy, and the guys that he hangs out with are the guys that are betting, 8 by 4 by 3 in the pick 4, you know what I mean? Like for 50 cents. Like, so you're eliminating, you're not eliminating, you're making it harder on them. But the point is that you're rewarding the guys who are in it for the rebate. I'm not sure that's what, maybe it is best. I don't know. But my point is that the lower minimums allow, the normal player, but even more so the computer player, to cover all combinations that match their opinion efficiently. So if there's $100,000 in a pick 4 and you want to, if you see a race covering all combinations 8 by 6 by 4 by 6 with $1 minimum, your ticket is too expensive for your reward, and you can't efficiently narrow those combinations enough. So when you have the 50-cent denomination, it allows you to have the things have them a little bit sharper, so that you don't end up upside down on your bet, which often happens. When I say upside down on your bet, when you first started playing this game and you were betting 3-horse exacta boxes, and you spent $12 on the ticket, and it came back $9.27 or $9.20, and you're like, oh, I won, but I lost. That's what I mean by upside down. And so the lower the denomination, it allows them to be more efficient. And even a better picture of it is like the pick 6, right? When it was a $2 minimum everywhere.
Oh, that's right. There's some that aren't, but right.
Yeah, when it was a $2 minimum everywhere, it's much harder to cover all of those combinations efficiently. But with 20 cents, you can cover them all, cover them efficiently, and just pick up money and pick up a profit, because there is a lot of guys, like I said, that are at the track that are just betting 8 by 6 by 6 by all by single by all, and
it's a lot of fat. They're creating a lot of fat.
And so there's a lot more to be had there. So I do agree that it's not a positive, the lower denominations. And in fact, I got really excited, and I won't say where, but there was a racetrack that was tossing around the idea of doing a $5 minimum pick 4. And I think it's really cool, and what it could do, and the type of players that could get involved in it. And here's the thing is, like the OTB guy who comes to the track with, $50 or $100, can still participate in that. It's not that he can't participate. He just can't do the spready thing he likes to do normally. He's got to go 2 by 2 by 1 by 1 or something, and now he's got a $20 ticket, and he can do that. And the reward, I think, would be better on scoring on those types of situations.
I still think all in all, I'll take the other side. All in all, I think that the low minimums are better because they reward, and maybe there's enlightened self-interest here, because they reward someone at my bankroll. I mean, the $5 pick four, like, it's going to be very rare that, whatever. I'm all for trying it, see what happens, look at it. I think getting more data and studying things in the parimutuel markets is only going to help us as a game as a whole. So, I'm not anti it, but at the same time, it feels like a bet I'd play once a meet when I had the right opinion to get involved there. Whereas I love the idea that whether it's doing ticket maker type plays or even the slightly more sophisticated plays in the picks based on what I think certain combinations will play, that ability to play efficiently allows me to compete toe-to-toe with players with a bigger – and players like me, not me alone. I don't feel like it's fair to take that advantage away from me. At the same time, I have a lot of sympathy for this idea because – and just to explain a little bit more from the Man in Black and Duke's perspective, these are guys who in the old days with the higher minimums would sweep pools, okay? So they could make their year on a one particular gimmick because they'd end up getting the whole thing by having enough of a bankroll to bet smart, and the players that were betting more than them even didn't have the ability to do that, the efficient spready combinations that now siphon money out of the pool. And here's the other thing. It also advantages Duke and the Man in Black to force your dad and his boys into playing more money more inefficiently, which they'd have to do with the higher threshold. So they're getting it. The theory goes that the real little guy is going to be just betting anyway because he doesn't really care about the efficiency. They take the likes of me out of the equation. I wouldn't be able to bet efficiently. So then they're betting against the lower guy. They can beat up on the lower guys, and they can stand toe-to-toe with the guys betting more than them. So from their point of view, they're absolutely right. Low minimums stink for them. But there's another set of players that I feel like I'm in the group that even though I now recognize sort of the pitfalls of it, I still think on balance it's something that I'd want to keep. So just
I'm not 100% sure those spready players don't need to learn to stop spreading so darn much. I try to teach my dad that all the time. I'm like, Dad, listen, you can play our address. That's fine. Seriously, I tell him this all the time. Play our address, which is 318. It's the house I grew up in. It's great. Play 318. But just at least glance at the form and pick one of them you like more and bet it 3 with 1-8 and 1-8 with 3. You'll just do better if you could just stop being so spready. So I think the same could be said for, players that are playing the 20-cent Rainbow Six I feel like, unfortunately, we kind of, I actually think that there's those 20-cent minimums in the Rainbow Sixes, you're preying on those smaller players because they think, I can go 4 by 4 by 4 by 4 by 4 by 4 by 4 and afford it. And they still don't have a chance to hit it because they're playing from an uneducated standpoint,
And if they do hit it, they could. You're still opening up the possibility of hitting it and being underwater betting
exactly.
that.
Exactly. And so I just think that it might even educate players to play a little bit more intelligently and to do better at this game. I don't know. We'll see.
You can argue it a lot of different ways. It's an interesting issue. I was just glad to see some civil discourse about it back and forth, and I'm eager to. Perhaps at Keeneland, we'll get some people on either end of this issue and can chat about it a little bit. Hopefully, there's going to be a good turnout for the Keeneland contest. What's that? Sunday, October 15th. DRF Tournaments is running qualifiers for that one. I can't believe it, JK. We've talked about so much stuff. I almost forgot. I can't say it's the lead with all the important stuff we've talked about so far on the show today. But this is huge news. We've talked before about how we have some listeners who listen only Friday, some who listen only Tuesday, the Tuesday only listener, doesn't yet know about the Last Chance Santa Anita feeder that we're running on Friday, complete with a DRF Players Podcast live broadcast and the Outplay JK bonus. Tell folks about that.
Yeah, we're going to do a tournament on Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun. The exciting part about it is if you can beat me, then it's a free roll for you. So I think like you said, it's when I say free roll, meaning that you'll get that credited back to your account. So I'm going to do my best to do as good as I can. But if you can beat me in that spot, and I pick a lot of chalk too, so if you just bomb away, you got a good shot. So yeah, so on
You're already
Friday,
trolling them. You're already trolling the audience with the
yeah.
trying to get them to pick senseless horses. You can just grind away and beat. You probably don't even care about getting into the Saturday qualifier. You just want to beat as many DRF podcast listeners as possible, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I just want it to be. I want people to come in thinking they're getting a free shot and then come up a little bit short.
You go.
I can give my Venmo out, and if people all donate $1, then I'll just tank the whole thing, and we'll all get in for free.
And then you'll never hear Jonathan's voice on this podcast again. That's the consequence of that. I know I'll be sending a personal email inviting Kevin Cox to play, so that'll be a fun side story.
He definitely can't beat me. His track record's shown that. So
let me tell you the specifics of the contest. It's going to be $25 to play. 1 in 10 will win their $230 entry to the Last Chance Santa Anita qualifier on Saturday. We're going to try to do this sort of like a happy hour thing, East Coast time. It'll be hopefully a 90-minute show / contest between 4 and 6 p.m. It's also using the live format. Now, I've had a lot of people, many of them listeners to the show, ask me, well, DRF tournaments, why don't you guys offer live tournaments at a lower price point? I have some sympathy for this view. When I was starting out researching the winning contest player, I got into tournaments by all the fun of the end game and the poker playing that happened at low buy-in live tournaments. So this is a chance for folks to really check out DRFT, hoping to lure a bunch of new players. And if you like this show, if you really like this show, you can really help us out. Go ahead and join and play all the ones, and consider that your $25 donation to showing the depth and power and reach of the DRF Players Podcast, because it'll make us look good if we can get 30 people in this thing on Friday. So should be up on DRF Tournaments today. If you don't know where to find that, tournaments.drf.com. Going to be a lot of fun. I also mentioned the Keeneland tournament. We have opportunities to win into that. Of course, also the World Championship of Handicapping, our online $1 million no takeout event. We've got ways to start your journey to win your share of $1 million every operating day at DRF tournaments. Get involved. So should we talk Breeders' Cup or Game of Thrones?
Well, they're both awesome, so whichever one you choose, I can deal with.
Well, where are you now? I know we've been trying very hard not to give away too many terrible spoilers. I think the last time we talked, you didn't even know there were dragons yet. So have you made your way along? Are you about halfway through the run at this point? What's the last thing you saw?
I am at the beginning of season 7.
Okay.
And I have seen at least 3 people that I really need to die, and so I'm good with it. Everything's been going the right way.
Without naming names, there was one character. I'm going to try to say this in a way that won't spoil, that fans of the show will know what I'm talking about. There's one character, maybe in a position of power, maybe particularly loathsome, that you had sent me a message like a week ago. You were eager to see his fate. Were you satisfied? Were you satisfied by what happened to him?
Yeah, it worked. It worked for me. I was pleased with the way that that person went down. I just needed it to happen sooner than later. And I think even before I said that, it even got worse. My hate for him got worse. So
I tell you, there's one hidden message in Game of Thrones to the young men and women of the world, and that message is, don't get married.
I know. I tried to tell our boy last week who wants to get the ring. I was like, look, man, I'm joking. Rethink it.
We did have a lot of positive feedback on the ring bet story. We're excited to follow that. For those who missed it, go back and listen. We can't recreate it here, but if you're not a Friday listener, go ahead and listen to the saga of the ring and our advice, which is all culminating with hopefully a wager at the Breeders' Cup to try to finance the purchase of a certain rock. And here, I think, looking at a price in the UK, if this is a real price, JK, I think we might have our ring bet sewn up right now.
All right, let's go.
Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Sharp Azteca, 6-1.
Really?
Should we stop the show right now and call some friends in England and see if that's a real number?
Who's shorter?
More Spirit at 2s, Practical Joke at 7-2, Sharp Azteca on oddschecker.com right now. The third choice at 6-1. Just to run through some of the others. Battle of Midway at 10, Accelerated 10. Oh, here's an old one. Sometimes on the site they have things that must have been posted after, the Breeders' Cup like a year ago, because Run Happy is somehow listed in the betting. Pavel listed at 12. Awesome Slew at 16. That's your sort of that's your sort of lower odds range. I mean, Sharp Azteca is going to be a lot shorter than 6-1 on the day. I can pretty much guarantee.
Yeah, I think that maybe what's happening there is Practical Joke's probably getting some love, and I would think that More Spirit, having beat Sharp Azteca at Belmont, is probably getting some love. Little home court, probably all the question marks with what's going on with the trainer of Sharp Azteca. I would assume that that's probably partially.
Do those things give you any pause? I mean, how much of a buy is that 6-1 for you? You're not. It doesn't sound like you're willing to jump on it.
It's like one of those, like, it's so high that it makes me nervous.
That's interesting, but I don't know that these guys know. This is UK bookmakers you might bet 50 pounds and it turns the market on its head. Like it could be just that kind of deal. But I mean, specifically More Spirit. Compare and contrast your thoughts. Breeders' Cup Mile, More Spirit, Sharp Azteca. Why is Sharp Azteca going to win the rematch?
Well, I just think Sharp Azteca, I think the 2 turns is going to kind of suit that horse a little bit better. He's not kind of I don't know what his size is, but he's more of a quick, fast, kind of beat you into submission type, where, More Spirit's more of a galloper to me, kind of a galloping along kind of horse. And so I feel like the last time they faced each other, which I guess was the Met Mile, going that 1-turn mile, probably fit More Spirit a little bit better. We haven't seen More Spirit back, which isn't necessarily a positive. There's been a lot of opportunities that he could have participated in. I think we heard he was coming for the Whitney, then we heard he was coming for the Woodward. Then so that's not encouraging as well. So I mean, obviously Baffert's good with this move of trading him up to a spot, but I don't know.
But still, of the Breeders' Cup bets we've talked about on the show so far, Ransom the Moon at 8, you're still preferring to Sharp Azteca at 6.
Yeah, I'm excited about Ransom the Moon in that spot. As long as everything kind of keeps going in the right direction. I don't know how the horse has been training. It's he's had a little bit of a break leading up to what I would assume would be the Santa Anita Sprint. But no, I like him in that spot, going 6 with real pace to close into.
We'll have plenty of opportunity to get some perspectives and read the vibes. And obviously there's going to be just tons of Breeders' Cup chatter on the show between now and then. But let's keep some of it going now. We wanted to look ahead. What did we say? We wanted to take a quick look at the turf, and we wanted to take a quick look at the Classic. Let's start with the turf. Currently, Ulysses, 3-1 favorite listed as, which makes sense. I'd liked him for the race coming out of last year's turf. I foolishly didn't bet him then. The only thing that gives me the littlest bit of pause about Ulysses is it does sound now like he'll be running in the Arc this weekend in France on Sunday, which, if he was, they talked about the turf as the main goal all year, but then to have the more important race, because the Arc is a more important race for European-based turf horses than the Breeders' Cup, to have that in between, suddenly it does just give me a little bit of pause. It would certainly make me not want to take the 3s just because so much could, he could bomb there, he could get hurt there, he could become over the top as a result of that race. So that's not like a super appealing number to me, even though I do like him for the race. Highland Reel also running in the Arc 7-2. Enable also running in the Arc at 4-1. And then we've got to get back the most likely USA-based runner, according to the odds, is Oscar Performance, geez, only 10-1. To have to go against, presumably, I'm just going to take a wild guess, 2 of the big Euros listed, as well as some of the other USA horses. My gut tells me I'm not going to sell at 10, but I'm firmly in the hold. I'm not too interested in buying. How about you?
No, that race is tough. The whole landscape changes when we find out which one of theirs is coming over.
Yeah.
Right, because whoever they send over is typically going to be favored. Not always, but in a majority of the time.
The horses I just mentioned would all be the favorite.
Right, so it's like it just matters which one of them shows up, and if one doesn't, then it significantly changes the price. I think that would be a dangerous proposition. You could get upside down on a bet quickly there, I would think, based on someone showing up randomly.
Other USA horses in the mix. Sadler's Joy listed at 16. That doesn't do much for me. I mean, there's a world in which I could see him on my tickets. I think they figured out how to ride him right. He's a grinder. He sort of grinds along. He's got that 3/8 run, and I think he's kind of gonna need collapses to win. I'm not sure if one of those Euros fires, he wouldn't have any real chance, would he? I mean, 16 certainly wouldn't be enough. Am I being too harsh?
No, I think that's probably fair. I mean, like I said, that's one of the toughest races for me. And most of the time, in most years, if an American horse wins, I lose. I usually use the Euros that other people suggest are good, and hold my breath that they get it done. It's just at 1.5 miles. The horses that they send over here are looking for firm ground. They typically get it, and when that happens, it always feels like they seem to have an advantage over us.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is so terrible. I'm forgetting Graham Motion's horse, who beat us at Santa Anita a few years back. Help me out.
Main Sequence.
There you go.
Such a good horse. That was a phenomenal example of Bobby's Kitten was a winner on that in that multi-race situation. I don't remember which way it was. I think I bet at pick 3, and Main Sequence cost me. Let's just say that the NTRA would be my friends right now, because I wouldn't have to report the money that I would have won if he would have won. Wouldn't have won.
Oh, that's pretty funny. All right, let's talk about the Classic. We've got about 3 minutes left on the show today. Let's see if they've updated the odds to include the results from this past weekend. Now, of course, that I'm looking for it, I can't find it. Let's use the handy-dandy search feature. And there it is. We've got right now, wow, this is interesting, Gunrunner installed as a 7-4 favorite, with Arrogate second choice, 7-2. West Coast actually behind Collected in the betting at 8-1, with Collected at 7-1. So that's how the top of the market shapes up right now. Again, I recognize these are not necessarily real numbers. It's not like you could bet 1,000 pounds on them. But it's just an interesting glimpse and a frame by which to view the race. What do you think of that big discrepancy between? My first thing I noticed is the big discrepancy between Gunrunner and Arrogate. What do you think about West Coast not being the third choice, and what do you think about West Coast at 8?
I guess if you're a West Coast guy, then absolutely get involved with that number. That's a good price.
He'll be shorter. He'll be half.
Yeah, I would think so. I think he'll probably be the third choice. He won't run again. He will have won the Travers and the Pennsylvania Derby with good numbers, and I think he'll be the third choice. So I think that makes a ton of sense. They'll be working. He'll be working there, so there'll be workouts. There'll be no questions about all of that. So I think that he'll probably go off shorter than that. If I was a Gunrunner guy, I sure wouldn't jump on Gunrunner now at 7-4. I would wait for Arrogate to start working well and West Coast to start working well and someone else to win the Awesome again impressively and blah, 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 blah. And then you take your price on Gunrunner when they actually load in the gate, because I feel like he'll be a little longer than 7-4.
Yeah, 9-4 over there. Our odds, we're talking about, shades of either side of 2-1, but, that's a huge difference whether you're getting a little under or a little over. Percentage-wise, it's massive at the low end of the odds spectrum. And, yeah, I mean, Arrogate's 7-2. I mean, I wouldn't, buy, sell, hold on that one for me.
Say it again. What you said?
7-2 Arrogate.
7-2. Oh, yeah, I'll take. I mean, the problem is that here's the thing. If he's right and everything's going in the right direction and the pace situation works out, the draw works out, and you want to bet him, he's going to be less than 7-2.
Way less.
If he happens to be higher than 7-2, it's because he was never going to win anyways.
Right. So what does that mean, though? I'm making you choose today. I'm making you choose on September 26th. Hold is an option.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, there's no reason to hold. You either buy or sell. So I guess I would buy it.
I'm holding all the way on there. I need more.
Yeah, I mean, my prowess in future bets is not always the best. So maybe I'll jinx him if I were to actually do it. So maybe I won't.
I'll tell you what, West Coast at 8 is one I would think about, with the idea of just having that in my back pocket and then using the money, elsewhere in the race, essentially looking to trade it out for a profit, just because I really feel like he'll be shorter than that. Though I guess it depends. Collected, is he going in the Awesome again?
You cut out a second. What'd you say, Pete?
Is Collected running in the Awesome again? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't. I haven't seen that. I would think my guess would be that Baffert's going to see how he's training.
Right. Well, that's right. That's his move. If he works well,
I would imagine he probably
show
hasn't committed. I would imagine he hasn't committed. I'll use the Googler while you're.
Well, we got to wrap it anyway.
One.
There'll be plenty of opportunity to talk about that, and we'll have an opportunity, obviously, to go over all those races and all these key Breeders' Cup preps. But it's fun to sort of frame the conversation and start thinking about the stuff. Now, I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin for between your various modes of transportation making the show happen today. Want to congratulate Muggsy again on her birthday and actually going through a whole show bark free, which we appreciate. I want to thank producer Craig for not only doing a great job on this show, but also going out of his way to make this special Friday broadcast happen. We want you to get involved in that. Go to tournaments.drf.com. The Friday Outplay JK game should be up later in the day. Mostly want to thank all the listeners for tuning in. Without you guys, there would be no show, and we really appreciate your continued support. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. We'll be back on Friday. May you win all your photos.